And here is a framework to understand what we mean by a learning organization, okay? An organization that allows for mistakes to happen at a certain level, allows people to take a look at what's going on. So this framework is put together by somebody called Kolb. So he developed a framework that we use for experiential learning. So he presented a model that looks at change, and it looks at learning, and it looks at growth. And he says, and I'm only talking about experiential learning, okay? It's quite different when it's not experiential. He says learning starts when you have a concrete experience, okay? Right now one can say you are involved in somewhat of a concrete experience, sitting here listening. The photographers, the video people are going through another form of concrete experience. But this is very immediate, okay? Concrete experience. We can learn from concrete experiences, but we need to carry that concrete experiences further to truly integrate it. So Kolb says, the concrete experience becomes the basis of reflective observation. Okay? So what do we mean by reflective observation? It means you've ways of developing observational tools to understand this experience. Okay? So sometimes in certain experiential classes, in certain experiential groups, you know, they've taken a lot of time doing a particular project, they stop and they reflect on that experience. So you're gathering data here. Here it means, and it's very difficult, becoming witness to your own actions. Quite something. Very hard to become a witness to your own. It also means becoming participant observer, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in a moment. But he says having a concrete experience and reflecting on it is not enough. When I first was exposed to it, I thought this is it. It's not it. He said you've got to take it a step further. And he calls this abstract conceptualization. Okay? Now, this fancy word, all that this fancy word means, so what? I've had this experience. I've observed certain things. And then I've got to say to myself, so what? How can I carry it outside of this group? How will it make a difference in the system? What have I learned from this? What concepts have I derived? What insights have I got from having reflected and had this concrete experience? Remember, the reflection comes from many, many perspectives. That's when it's a rich perspective, not when it's just one. Now he says, that's not enough. You've got to take it one step further. And he calls this part active experimentation. It simply means you've got to do something. You've had an experience, you've come and you've observed, you've gathered data, you've come to some kind of conclusion, but you're not really sure. And here is the testing out, the trying it out, the doing, the experimenting. And then it goes on with other kinds of experiences. Now, it doesn't always mean that you stop, you reflect, you say, what's the learning, and you try it differently. Often it gets all meshed up. But these areas, concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation are all representing and learning abilities, okay? There are 4 learning abilities that you need to really integrate the information, the work that you are doing in a team. So here you need to be able, in an experience, and I don't know how much you are getting in it right now, you need to be able to surrender yourself to the experience without any bias. See? I'm going to be in it. The reflective observation needs another kind of skill. The abstracting needs another kind of assessment. And here it needs the trying out. Now, the way we are brought up and our experiences at home, we develop abilities one over another. We don't all have great expertise in all four. Some people jump into experiences, but don't reflect on it. Others reflect on the experience so much that they don't take action. I often fall into this category, and my students tell me, Raye, stop, you're reflecting things to death. And at some point, my reflections have got to lead to some actions. Then if you're having people jump into experiences but never learning, not really observing what has gone on. So this would be one component. Here's another one. It's very difficult to be concrete and abstract at the same time. Extremely difficult. It's polar opposite. So what you're getting here is polar opposite areas in the learning process. And that's how integration takes place. They are really polar opposite, and they create tension. I don't know whether you've experienced tension when you're doing experiential work. When you are getting close to that kind of tension and conflict, that's good, because that means you're bringing this together and this together, the polarities together, which is extremely, extremely hard. But if you want to move forward in a project, and my sense is that the group is in a project, you've got to reflect on the project. You've got to give some feedback. You've got to sort of take a look at a few things. And you've got to say, what have we learned, and test it out. So learning takes place on polar opposite axis. And the tension is a healthy piece of tension. So teams and groups learn to, at some point, for instance, in meetings, we've developed a process in meetings in which we have what we call a transfer in at the beginning of a meeting and checking with people, how are you doing? Where's everybody? What was this week like? But at the end of the meeting is, we give 10 minutes maybe to the end of the meeting. Well, where are you as we end this meeting? What are you taking away with you? What is clear? What is unclear? And that leads a little bit to some reflective observation. The best observations and abstractions come when you're all together, but it doesn't always happen. It might come 2 or 3 of you together in a subgroup that might come back to the larger group and say, do you know what? I learned last week we didn't have a structure for our decision making. You know? That was the problem that occurred. And that comes from this process.